Hey guys, it's Kirsten with Whole Life Freedom. I hope you're doing well today. Holistic health coach, personal trainer, and emotional freedom practitioner. And this week I would love to talk about conquering those pesky cravings. Woo! That's a big one. I have noticed that come up more and more in this season of COVID than any other time. And even for me, they've been a new, I'm not going to say struggle, because I've overcome that struggle using some of these tactics I'm giving you, but they have become something I've been way more aware of, and I have heard more people talk about them than ever before. So I'm excited because these tools, if you really employ them, can really break through some of those cravings happening. And a lot of times we tend to believe that it's not possible to come through a craving, or I've just always craved that, or no, I've tried that and just haven't seen any success. I don't know if you've ever thought that before, but I've heard those three things so many times. And the truth is, cravings can absolutely be overcome. They've done it over and over again. And so let's dive right in. What is a craving? Well, a craving is usually something that you have emotional attachment to, something that you are eating that comes up and it invades your thoughts, it invades your process, and you just can't stop until you have that food. And when you're having it, you just can't stop eating it. And maybe you don't have all of those elements involved in a craving. Maybe it's just involved in your thoughts or your emotions. Maybe you're fine once you have one bite of it. But most of the time, there's a few elements wrapped up inside of that craving that make it very difficult to overcome. And even more so if you've been inside a lot more than usual. So, couple of things that are really helpful to think about is it's not you. It's not your fault. It's not something that you did and only you did, and you cannot break free from it, and you're unlike anyone else that you know. The truth is, most people have experienced cravings, if not everyone. I'd love to say everyone, but I don't know everyone on the planet. So I'll just stick with most people. And you're not alone in this. There have been many books on them, many studies on them. There are even places that exist primarily to only help you overcome those cravings. So I just want to send some encouragement your way that sometimes we're lied to internally in our minds and our emotions to think that we're alone in this, that we can't get through it. And you know what? Other people are just simply stronger than I am. And that is also a lie, to think that someone is just stronger than you and that's why you can't overcome it. So I wanted to go into 3 areas today that will hopefully help bring some freedom to you. And when we can overcome those cravings, there's a lot of emotional and mental space that's also cleared up in that process, which I really love seeing that broken off as much as possible, because we get to use our thoughts for other things. We don't have to feel overcome by something as simple as food. And food is really meant to be fuel. It is meant to be enjoyed, but it's not meant to be enjoyed at the expense of our health, our energy, our lifestyle, and our thought life. So let's jump right in. These 3 simple areas are the type of food we eat, our emotional state, and our beliefs. And usually I think of starting with beliefs at the very beginning, because that really is what starts it all, is what do you believe is possible. But as I was really thinking through this and taking some time around this, I have noticed over and over again when it comes to our health, our state of being, that ignorance is definitely bliss, but knowledge is power. And the more that we know, the more things start to lose their power over us. and the more power we gain over those things. And so I'm excited to share a bit of knowledge with you, share a bit of insight with you that will hopefully bring some freedom to you. You know, I'm all about our freedom in our whole life, and especially around our mental, emotional, and physical state, our spiritual state of being. So let's jump right in. First thing is talking about the food that we eat and the type of food that we eat. So, you know, if you listen to any of the other podcasts or videos or blogs that I've written a little bit about our emotional state around food and how that affects us with these types of foods that we eat. That sugar and salt are actually trigger chemicals inside of our body and our brain to shut off our hunger mechanisms and also increase our desire for more. And now when you start thinking through that, you can probably, I know even as I say that, I have all these images flash through my mind of pizza and wanting more and more pizza, and I just can't have enough. I know that if I'm not aware of my hunger state, of my emotional state, and the type of food I'm eating, I can eat an entire pizza, no problem. Yeah, I'm gonna be full and probably a little uncomfortable later on, but in the moment, all I want is more pizza. And that is because the chemicals in the cheese, the salts in the food, and generally there's also sugar mixed into the dough of our pizza, and that allows it to taste better, but it also brings out desire for more. So it's important, okay, now that I have that knowledge, what can I do to stop it? Or what can I do? I still want that pizza, I still want to enjoy it. There's some pretty amazing things that we can do around that to even cut the cravings in half while you're in the moment. So this is really fun. It's not just about completely avoiding those things, though the elimination tactic is very, very powerful in healing our emotional state, allowing those foods to come out of our system. But there are some other ways to go about this, and I love the way our microbiome in our gut, so that's all the little guys inside of our gut that they communicate to our body, they talk to us, they are really our core of health starts in our gut. And that is a powerful belief. If you understand kind of what's going on in there, you can actually start to change that microbiome over time. And it really doesn't take very long to change it. So we've heard the statement, you are what you eat, but I'd like to change that for this one today. And this is something that I say pretty often in coaching, is that you crave what you eat. Wow. So a lot of times you start to think about, what am I eating on a regular basis? Well, those are typically foods that you're going to continue to crave until a couple of shifts start to happen. So there's 3 awesome shifts that you can make around food. And number 1 is probably the simplest form that I have seen work over and over again, and I absolutely love this method. It's called adding in and crowding out. And what that means is, rather than focus on the foods that you cannot have, most of the time when we think of cravings, we think of, oh, I can't have that cake, or oh, I just can't have that cookie, or oh, I just can't have that pizza, or I just can't have those chips. And we start talking about in language of what we can't have. And so that means our focus is primarily on what we're not allowed to have. And what that does is it causes us to think about that food more, causes us to crave it more. That doesn't work. And that's why if you've tried to stop eating those foods and you've tried to stop it based on thinking about not eating them, it's going to cause you to want to eat it even more. So if you are good at eliminating foods, I'll talk about that in just a second. So let's come back to that. But adding in means I am going to focus my attention on whole foods. So plants, seeds, beans, legumes, nuts, grains, those kind of things that are full of nourishment. I'm going to focus on those for a season, and I'm going to really look at my breakfast, my snacks, my lunches, my dinners, and any other meals, and look at how many whole foods are in those meals. Not looking at condemnation, guilt, or shame on what is not. So let's just say, for example, you're like, I'm having some dessert, and it's a piece of chocolate cake, but it's got strawberries. Okay, so we are focusing on those strawberries, and there's a very, very powerful reason we're doing that. Number one, your ability to think about something, what you focus on grows. Okay, so if you're focusing on the shame and guilt or frustration or around that craving and that food, then that's going to grow. And we're going to think about it, it's going to grow, we won't beat the craving. Okay, but if you think about, oh, how many strawberries do I have in that meal? Let's see if I can get it to be a 50%. So 50% strawberries, 50% cake. Okay, I start thinking about those foods. What about my breakfast? Okay, I'm looking at that milk and cereal. Okay, there are no whole foods in that bowl right there. How can I increase the amount of fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, grains that I'm getting in there, whole foods? Okay, let's shift things around. I'm focusing on those. When I'm focusing on it, it's going to grow. Okay, why am I doing that? Well, number one, our bodies need nutritional value. We need vitamins, minerals, nutrients, phytochemicals. We need those things in order to thrive. So we need our energy levels to come from those things. But another really neat thing is that as you start feeding your body whole foods, if you remember what we crave, what we eat is what we crave, okay? So we crave what we continually eat, and what we focus on grows. So if we focus on getting more and more whole foods into our diet, then the more we do that, the more we eat them, the more we actually will start to crave them. Now, hear me out for 1 second on that. We're not going to crave an apple in the same way we crave chips or cake or chocolate, anything like that. And that's simply because the chemical balance of that salt and sugar are stripped of their nutritional value, and they create a flood of emotions inside of our body. They either comfort us or give us an unnatural amount of energy. And so we do have to understand that part, that we're not going to crave it the same way, but you will start to want it more. And that's what we want to do, is we want to start shifting our microbiome in our gut to start wanting and looking for those foods more. And here is another trick. So that one trick is about just focusing on those foods and looking at every meal. How many are you getting? And start looking at that. Start your focus shifting from what you can't have to what you can, and start increasing those foods to shift your gut microbiome. Okay, but here's another fun thing. So we know that processed foods, sugars, salts, those kind of things tend to cause inflammation, but they also tend to cause a flood of chemicals in our body. Something that's really neat that I would love for you to try is sandwich some of those foods in a way that they come before or after a food that might trigger cravings. So I call these foods trigger foods, and we all have a little bit different trigger foods. So when I was in college, brownies were my trigger food. I would get stressed out and I could eat brownies. I couldn't turn that trigger off, is what I'd like to say. And there's a little trigger that turns on. Addicts are very familiar with that trigger, but we're all a little different. Not everybody has the same addict type of personality, but trigger foods are designed that way. Okay, so it's not your fault, but it's good to be aware. Pizza is a trigger food. chocolate cake is a trigger food. Refined foods and processed foods are generally trigger type of foods, okay? So, but your particular way of reacting to it is going to be different based on your emotional state, your body makeup, your mental state, all of that. So if you know it's a trigger food, what you can do is add in or add around it some foods that are going to cut that craving down. So for example, I started trying this around pizza just to try it out. And there have been many studies around it. It's not just made up. It's been thoroughly studied around weight loss and around cutting these cravings. So what you do, for example, we know that apples can be a really powerful tool. They've got a lot of probiotics in them. They've got a lot of fiber and a ton of nutrients. And so they're very nutritious for you. So you take an apple, you eat it before those craving foods. Maybe you eat it before you go to a restaurant. Restaurants typically tend to have a lot more salt than another place when you make it at home, because they're putting oils and salts and sugars in their food to make it taste better. So you have an apple before you go. If you're at home and you're having pizza delivered, taken out, try having an apple beforehand and try having your cutoff point of pizza and then having an apple or a salad or something that is going to cut that craving down. And so I did something very simple. I just started stir frying a big handful of spinach, mushrooms, and onions in a pan, and I put it on top of my pizza just to try it out. I would have an apple beforehand, and I would stir fry this spinach and mushroom and onion mix on top of my pizza. And I knew that that food wasn't going to have a lot of salt in it, and it was going to be very nourishing. So I'd add it to my pizza, and it was actually really good. But I noticed that I could only have about 3 pizzas in a pizza that I normally could have 5, 6, 7, 8 if I didn't put a cap on myself. And I would normally have my 3 pieces and want more. And I would just sit there thinking, I want more, I want more, I want more. And while my capability had grown over the years of saying, I can say no much easier than I used to, and mostly for me, that's for health and energy reasons, are heavier and more weighted for me. My why is much stronger these days. But I loved how I felt afterwards. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Now, I don't eat pizza very often, but it's a fun experiment to try. Something that normally triggers you, put an end to it by putting a bookshelf behind it of something that is nourishing. So most fruits and vegetables will do the trick. If you're having a cake and you're having a hard time, you're like, I can eat that whole piece, or I can eat that whole pan of brownies if I didn't have a stopper. Put a stopper in it for yourself. Try it out. It will cut the craving because your taste buds will shift based on that food that you're eating. All right, that's pretty exciting. I think that is really incredible. They have done studies to show that even someone eating 1 apple before going into a buffet, they end up eating several hundred calories less than when they just go in straight beforehand. And why? Because that has filled your body with some nutrients. It has gotten you more full, the fiber, and it also cuts the palate of cravings in your mouth. So it's pretty incredible. All right. Enough with that. So, when you're thinking about your food, think through the positive side of it. And then if it's really, really a strong craving that you would really like to cut out, like a lot of people do this with sugar and salt, is they'll take a time off. And that there is always a season and a time where, say you do a 7-day elimination diet or a cleanse or something along those lines, to just let your body exist without those things for a season. And you can do anything, anywhere from, I would suggest doing more than 3 days if you're going to do an elimination, because the first 3 days your body is really, letting go of that, and you've got a lot of emotions coming through, you've got your physical state coming through, and you really don't start to physically and emotionally see breakthrough until several days in, and you want to feel successful. You want to have success around it. So I would say 1 week is always a great time frame to do that, or if you're really ambitious, going for 30 days and just say, this month I'm not going to be eating any sugar or salt, and allow your system to get used to that. What's going to happen is your microbiome, your taste buds, your mental and emotional state are going to come into a new space, and you'll start to see things very differently, and that will majorly cut the power of these cravings. Okay, not everybody has the opportunity to do that. We have a lot going on, so those are generally for certain seasons that you're in, if you're feeling ready for it. And this brings me to our last 2 points. I'm going to make these a little bit quicker because I've talked about these in other places. But one is our emotional state. And this one is so important that I did a 3-part series about our emotional state surrounding food a couple of weeks ago. So if you're interested in going deeper, definitely tune into that. But something that I wanted to talk about, our emotional state and cravings specifically, and why it's not your fault, is when we think about how we were raised, how we raise our children, how we even view food as a place of both celebration and comfort. That's a really fascinating thing to put into perspective, that for most people during their formative years from 0 to 5, they have experienced some sort of use of food to fulfill an emotional state of being. Woo, that is pretty intense when you really think about it. That in a time where you didn't really have choice and an ability to say no to something, and were primarily ruled by your emotions, you experienced by an authority figure food being put in that place of calming your emotions, or of becoming a food source of celebration. And what do I mean by that? For example, hey, if you do if you clean your room, I'll give you those cookies. That would be a source of celebration, okay? So yeah, you ate all the vegetables on your plate, now I give you a cookie. And hey, that's fun, and that's definitely a great reward system for learning to eat healthier. But as that plays out in our later life, we start to immediately, subconsciously, without even thinking about it, using food as a reward system over and over and over again. We use it as a reward system for, when you get your degree, you go out and you eat. When you do all these different things, it becomes your reward system. It's immediately what you think about when you want to celebrate something. And that's not a big problem, but it can be when it comes to cravings, and it can be especially helpful to be aware of that. Just simply that awareness can start to break off the pattern of thinking that we've got to use food to help us get through something, to reward something. That brings me to the other place of using food as comfort, using food to help us through stress, through sadness, through grief, through anger, through pain, help get our emotions up. And that's where it really becomes tricky, but it is absolutely 100% possible to break free in that. And we can invite God into that space. We can admit that that's what's happening. They say the first step in breaking free of any addiction, now addiction is separate, but the first step of breaking free of an addiction is simply admitting that you're powerless over it. It seems so simple, but yet when we think we're the ones that need to have the most power over it, it changes everything for us. And so similarly with our emotional state, if we can just simply become aware For example, I know I used the chip example, but I would notice that I would go to a bag of chips when I was feeling extra stressed at work. And I started realizing, oh, that's what's happening. I need to deal with the stress, not go to the chips. And when you start to deal with your emotional state, the power of that craving starts to break off. And now I can have, small handful of chips, acknowledge that I'm enjoying them, and they have no power over me. I don't eat the whole bag anymore, and I actually enjoy them. And that's really what my heart and my dream for you is, that you can enjoy these foods without allowing them to have power over you. And that is the third part, is the belief that is 100% possible for you. It's possible through going through these things, taking some stock and some awareness. When you feel the craving come up, what type of food is it? Is it a salty or sugary food? Learning some of these things that we talked about today. What can you do about that? Okay, well, maybe you can sandwich it with some whole foods. Help it to cut the craving. You can also cut it out of your life for a period of time to just allow that to come through. And you can also focus on the positive things, but you can also start renewing your mind that overcoming that is not a matter of pure willpower, but it's about understanding how it works in your system and going, oh, these foods trigger that. These emotions trigger that craving. Stress often triggers salty foods. Fatigue often triggers sugary foods. Sadness triggers different types of food. Anger triggers different types of food. What state of being are you in when you're thinking of that food? And sometimes we have gotten so out of practice of being aware of that I encourage you to grab a little journal and write it down. Okay, I'm really craving cookies right now. I'm really craving ice cream. Now I break off that you're gonna start craving this right now. But as you're thinking about them, write down the emotions surrounding those feelings. Did a thought trigger that craving? And go, oh, okay, let me first deal with that emotional state, deal with that thought, and then see if the craving is still there. Drink some water, have some apples or a salad or some carrots and different foods that are nutritious, and then see, again, is that craving still there? And watch it start to break off your life, and the power of it start to break. All right, I believe this is possible for you and everyone watching or listening or reading. So I just declare breakthrough over you, over your cravings, your mental, emotional, physical, spiritual state over them. And I bless your body, I bless your spirit, and I bless your soul. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.